Good afternoon YouTube, this is Warbles on a Lot here with part 2 of my triptych about magical thinking. This is it's for the education of people who like to believe that there's no possible way you can test any kind of a spiritual or magic idea. Now, in part 1 we had a look at praying for rain in a church with a waterproof roof versus making up your own rain ritual. We compared making up your own rain ritual with going and asking the local tribal people what their ancestors used to do. We compared doing a traditional local rain dance with one that's augmented by a magic spell enhancer. We looked at sympathetic magic and parasympathetic magic, or negative sympathetic magic. And because we're going to look at the Australian Aboriginal magic spell enhancers here and now, I've got to ask any traditional Australian Aboriginal culture practicing woman to leave this video. Okay, you've got to count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, the reason the traditional Aboriginal cultural women had to leave is because they weren't allowed to hear or see a bullroarer, which is what the magic spell enhancers are called. This is the actual origin of the phrase, "not within a bull's roar." You'll hear rednecks and agriculturalists in inland Australia still in 2012 talking about this, that or the other thing, not allowed within a bull's roar of some other thing, right? And they don't realise that they're referring to an Australian Aboriginal religious cultural prohibition against women knowing about men's magic spell enhancers. Interesting, isn't it? So, we're going to look at the historical design analysis of the bullroarer, how it came to be invented. We're also going to look at physically how it works, and I'm going to have a go at looking at spiritually how it works. So it's not as if we're setting an easy target, but if it was easy they would have got somebody else to do it. And the chairman of the Regional Land Council told me in 1997, mate, if you can explain Aboriginal technology to them white fellas, it's got to be an improvement. Okay, so here we have 3 different styles of Australian aerodynamic artefact. Now, the oldest one, in terms of technology, is the cross boomerang at the bottom. The cross boomerang would be traditionally tied up with human hair, and that's one of the reasons Aboriginal men liked women with long hair, was because of all the high-grade twine they could produce. And imagine that you throw your cross boomerang up into the sky and you miss all the birds and it falls back down and it lands on one of the 4 blades. So that end of that blade stops immediately. It's already stopped while the cross stick is still coming down. So they break here in the middle. And what you generally happen is you get 1 long stick, which you can use again, and 2 short sticks, which are just about useless. So somebody in a fit of crankiness has taken these 2 short sticks from the busted cross boomerang and thrown them away, maybe one at a time for best results, and as it's left the fingers, it's had the airflow straight onto the leading edge. And because it's curved on top and it's flat on the bottom, it's created a downwash from the trailing edge, and that's created lift, and there's been no tail to stabilise it, and so it has commenced to tumble. And as soon as it turns 180 degrees, this phenomenon happens again, and it increases in speed until it's forming an aerodynamic cylinder tumbling in the sky. Lift is then generated by the rotation of the cylinder, and it lifts itself straight up into the sky, and it's moving and tumbling fast enough that it starts off with a fairly sharp buzzing noise, which fades out to a soft muttering purr as it climbs up and hangs in the sky and then begins to glide back down, purring all the way. It wobbles a bit from gyroscopic precession due to the increase and decrease in RPM, but yeah, then it falls back down to the ground purring. And at least 10,000 years ago, because that was when the hubless asymmetric swept leading and trailing edge 1-piece boomerang took over from the 4-bladed cross boomerang, which has got more weight, more drag, and doesn't fly as good. And importantly, if your hubless asymmetric boomerang hits too hard, it tends to split along the grain. It doesn't break. So you can't smash a hubless asymmetric boomerang and finish up with a tumble stick to throw away, and discover that if you put a hole in the end of the tumble stick and swing it around your head, you can make that noise as often as you like. And when you go making that noise, some very interesting things happen. Gravity sucks, all right? So the earth sucks the bit of wood down towards the ground. But centrifugal versus centripetal force pulls the string tight. The harder you swing it, the more it pulls the string tight. And if it was just up to the weight, it would orbit roughly parallel with, the hand that's holding the string and swinging it. But all things are not equal. Because it's spinning and it's rotating and it's generating lift, and the lift is either up towards the sky or it's rotating the other way and the lift is down towards the ground, it'll not only accelerate and decrease in pitch of the sound and the volume of the sound as it spins faster and as it orbits faster, but when it gets the string as twisted up as it can and it can't spin anymore, then it stops, reverses direction, accelerates, and you get an alternating helical vortex of sound with your brain in the middle of it. And that does some very interesting things, according to the Aborigines. So let's have a bit of a talk about what they thought about the soul and what it runs on and how it works, and why playing with one of these might make your magic spell 5 times more effective, which is what I found that it does. Okay, now in the book on Aboriginal culture that I read, in the chapter on Aboriginal magic, in the section on how bullroarers work, where it told me that they're called a Gayandi, or spirit of the borer, it explained that the Aboriginal word for the soul is dowie, right? And it showed a drawing of the soul, or the dowie, and this dowie surrounds the physical form in much the same way that a New Ager will tell you they can see somebody's aura. It's also very reminiscent of Kirlian photography, which is a technique where you put a piece of photographic film in a light-proof cardboard box and stick somebody's hand or perhaps a leaf on top of the box, and over the hand you set off an automotive spark plug with a high-intensity discharge of a spark. And then you just go and develop the X-ray film, and what you wind up with is sort of like an X-ray of the person's hand, but around it, it shows a ghostly aura, right? Now that, I suspect, is a photograph of the dowie, or the aura, using modern technology. If you do it with a leaf, the leaf has got an aura as well. If you cut the leaf in half and photograph the half a leaf, not only does the half a leaf have an aura, but it's got a ghostly projection of where the rest of the leaf should be. Strangely, if you get an amputee and you get a Kirlian photograph of an amputee's missing limb, it shows on the Kirlian photography as well. They've still got the phantom limb, which is why they get phantom limb pain, I guess. It's a complicated system. So anyway, according to the Aboriginal book on culture and magic and bullroarers, talking about the soul, it says that in the dowie there are cells which their purpose in being there is to turn biochemical electrical energy that your nerves run on into stuff called tampanyiri murop. And tampanyiri murop is life force spirit energy, which is what the creator of the universe is made of. So if you're walking along and you're talking to the creator and you're asking for help, then you're sending out little bursts of tampanyiri murop coming from these cells. And apparently the sound of the alternating helical vortex generated by the Gayandi stimulates these cells, such that when the bullroarer is coning high, the cells make much more energy than they normally would, stimulated by the sound, and this energy is stored in the bullroarer, in the wooden body. Then, when the cone flips over and it cones low and you can feel the pressure, it's possibly just sound waves and auto-suggestion, but the tampanyiri murop comes back out of the bullroarer, it courses through your dowie again, it gets amplified and magnified again, and then that magnified signal goes out to the creator of the universe, taking your magic spell with it. So there is a mechanism, at least a suggested mechanism, and I can't argue with any of the theory behind the mechanism. It makes better sense from a theological point of view than getting on your knees and ringing a bell so that the God theory will pay attention while you cast a magic spell to transmogrify the bread into the torn asunder body of your murdered prophet, and transmogrify the wine into the drained blood from your murdered prophet, so that you can commit ritual cannibalism. Right? If you want to look at religions that are ridiculous, then don't go looking at the Australian Aboriginal spiritual belief system, because it actually makes sense. They came up with a device for turning muscular energy into sound, using the sound to stimulate their soul to make more life force spirit energy to make the magic spells work better. And you've got to be a little bit careful using these things. I mean, you've no doubt heard the story of the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Young fella that the wizard told to clean up the workshop. The wizard went out for the day and the young fella grabbed a hold of the boss's big book and he come up with a spell that got the kitchen broom to clean up the house, all right, cleaned him right out of the house because he had no idea how to make it stop. Well, likewise with bullroarers, when I first got into them, I made one day out of a bit of wood that I chainsaw milled after it had fallen down on this property. It was a bit of wattle, which is a very dense wood, very good for making bullroarers because it's stiff, has nice harmonics. And in the afternoon at sundown, I was visiting a friend to give him a lift down to the neighbouring large rural city sort of thing, where he was one of the dual heads of the local environment centre. And they were putting on a poetry night, and I was the guest of honour, the concert performance poet and poet in residence. And while demonstrating the bullroarer at sundown at 5,000 feet above sea level, I forgot that it was a magic spell enhancer. And while swinging it around my head, I allowed the selfish, lusty thought to go through my mind that despite the fact that I'd split up from the wife 2 and a bit years earlier, and I'd decided not to have any new partners, I thought, wouldn't it be nice if one of the sweet young things at the poetry reading ignored her life situation and ignored my life situation and took me home for a one-night stand. And you know, the particular sweet young thing that I'd been considering invited me home, and I didn't get back to my place till 9:30 the next day. My children were 7 and 8 at the time, and when they heard of this, they chased me around the house with tea towels. Might have been 6 and 7. Yeah, 6 and 7. Now, I don't think there's much reason for a 36-year-old, as I was at the time, I'm 50 now, 36-year-old, penniless hillbilly poet living in a tin shed to be attractive to a teeny bopper. But the day I forgot that bullroarers are serious magic spell enhancers, that is what happened. And you know what, afterwards my life turned to shit several different ways, and it wasn't much fun for the kids either for about 3 or 4 years. But yeah, they're serious. Beware of the Sorcerer's Apprentice effect. These are decidedly not child's toys or playthings. You really shouldn't use them unless you know what you're planning on and doing and you can understand the consequences. And in the third of the magical thinking triptych, I'm going to demonstrate how this thing works. I'm going to put on a hillbilly head camera and stand in a position where I can film my own shadow and put your ears at the centre of the alternating helical vortex of sound. You won't get the full effect because I've only got a mono recording system, but you'll get some idea. And for anybody who genuinely, honestly believes that you can't test God theory or magical thinking, let this be a lesson to you. There's more to heaven and earth than is dreamed of in your little philosophy, Horatio. You know who said that? A bloke called Billy Wobblestick, otherwise known as William Shakespeare. He said it in Macbeth. Ciao.